unstable Africa drives refugees north. Okay, and this is something we relied on the National Defense University, which has done some extraordinary work, excellent a report that they have on their website. They have an Africa Center, but I'll give you the very quick. I'll share the map, and I'll give you the very quick summary of facts, and then we will then talk about what could happen. Now, look at this. Look at the zone of conflict now. Countries in conflict in Africa. Libya in the north to DRC, Mozambique even on the coast, all the way west from Mali, east to Somalia. So the entire continent seems to be on fire. And of course, the maximum number of displaced people is from Sudan. We'll get into more details in a second. But the key thing here is lots of things have converged together in Africa to create a perfect storm. Militant Islamist violence has gone up. Events and fatalities have reached a record high. In fact, fatalities have tripled since 1920 to approximately 11,000. Another big development, which a lot of people are not noticing with as much attention as this should, is how the Russians have replaced the French in many countries. They have conducted disinformation campaigns. They have, or you could say propaganda, just as they did in Soviet times. You could argue everyone does that. So what's new? But what's new is that they have their mercenaries in places like Mali they got rid of the French legionnaires. And they are in Niger. They are all over the map. Sudan, which broke into Sudan and South Sudan, and both are facing conflict. Sudan is in civil war. I won't give you all the details and what's going on there, but the point is that Sudan's conflict is causing internal conflicts in Libya, Chad, Central African Republic, South Sudan, and Ethiopia to exacerbate. Foreign powers, notably the United Arab Emirates, UAE, Russia, Iran, and Egypt, they are all involved. Turkey has also waded in. Of course, I'm sure the Israelis are up to something too. Deployment of drones, munitions, mercenaries, and resource smuggling is up. Africa continues to be a resource-rich but poor continent. And this scramble for regional influence is leaving not just Sudan, but many other countries a fragmented coalition wherein different groups, armed groups, and different ethnic groups are fighting each other. Now, one could say that this is all because of foreign interference or because of warlords or because of poverty. But there are two things that have happened at the same time. Population has exploded and resources have dwindled. Look at Lake Chad. 90 to 95% of it is dry. If you're a herder, you're going to fight for water. Simple as that. What has also happened is global warming, which leads to climate change, that has exacerbated the situation. Famine and floods have increased exponentially. Acute food insecurity now affects 163 million Africans. This is over a tenth of the population of Africa. This is nearly triple the number of 5 years ago. So the displacement, the movement of people within Africa, and of course the movement of people out of Africa, escaping the dire situation there, is creating problems in Europe. Before I stop, there's another map which I'd like to share, which is also telling, which is about famine and floods. A lot of places you have drought, okay? So you don't get enough rainfall at all. So to sustain life becomes very difficult. But at the same time, when you do get floods, I mean, look at the graph here. Look at how you'll get rainfall increases over historical average. 27 countries in Africa's tropical zone experienced unusually heavy rainfall in 2024 compared to their historical norms. This results in thousands of fatalities, millions of displaced people, and millions of acres of inundated cropland. So this tension in Africa, and you could say Glenn predicted it in when he was in the National Intelligence Council, has now come to pass because now Africans get on boats with modern boats with engines, with obviously with grave risk. You can cross in simple boats across to the Mediterranean. So many of the people crossing over to the UK happen to be Africans. And this is creating pressure not just within Africa, but in Europe. And as the Singaporean Prime Minister, late Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, one of the great statesmen of the 20th century, said, if Europe does not export prosperity south, Africans will export people and poverty north. And that is what Europe is facing at the moment, thanks to the crisis in Africa.
Yeah, I'd say what makes this significant for 2025, because the misery has been the steady state for ever in Africa, or certainly since, well, for forever. Are two things.
Since the Europeans got there, since the Portuguese started arriving on the shores, misery. I mean, there must have been misery before, but it increased. And of course, the Arabs were involved in the slave trade too, so we can't give Arabs a pass.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame the slave trade on the current problems on the slave trade exclusively, but that's a debate for another day. There are two things happening. The demographic bubble in North Africa in particular, but Africa in general, is now reaching a bursting point, meaning that the numbers of young adult people in the entire continent has far exceeded the ability of the states and the environments to respond and meet their desires and needs. And two, as you touched upon, global warming, climate change has placed existential strains on agricultural production, social services, water availability, and so on. And so the result is that there are now unprecedented numbers in the many millions of people desperately seeking to survive by fleeing north to prosperous, wet, productive, agriculturally Europe. This was all foreseen decades ago. It is all happening. The one big change from predictions is that even the worst case scenarios about the effects of global warming have proven to be too conservative. Things are worse and accelerating worse than even the worst predictions had said they would. And thus, you have a huge flow of desperate people to the north. That's the one thing that is different from the otherwise seemingly endless suffering and struggles of Africa. And in 2025, whether that will come to, quote, a head, I think no, but increasing pressures to the point where we really need, because we're running far too long, to talk just briefly about Europe, lead to pressures in Europe that Atul can briefly summarize now.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.